Welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. We're here today with our Wellness and Weight Loss Wednesday topic of the week, and we are going to be going over glyphosate, herbicides, all sorts of things sprayed on your food, as well as this year's 2020 Dirty Dozen. So I'll be able to link up all the research, all the studies, some very helpful articles and websites, as well as an image of the 2020 Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 over at stephencabral.com/1629. Again, that's stephencabral.com/1629. That's where all of today's show notes will be. So for those people that are unfamiliar with glyphosate, also sometimes pronounced glyphosate, it is an herbicide. And what an herbicide does is when it's sprayed on foods, it selectively kills the weeds in the area. So you're only getting the plant that you want, the vegetation that you want grown. And it also kills a lot of the unwanted pests on the crops. Now, you might say, well, that sounds like a pretty good thing. And in theory, it is, right? You don't have to do the weeding. You don't have to worry about all sorts of different types of bugs eating your crops that shouldn't be there. The problem is it's a short-sighted thought process. It's what I talk about with a lot of times conventional medicine. And again, I always want to put the disclaimer in there. I am a huge fan of conventional medicine when used at the appropriate times, right? I'm a big fan when it's used in life-saving based conditions. But if we're giving people biological drugs, if we're putting people on a lifetime of statins, a lifetime of acid blockers, a lifetime of blood pressure-based medication, etc., well, we're not really solving a long-term issue. What we're doing is causing a lot more long-term issues for the short-term solution of getting rid of the symptoms. And in this case, with an herbicide like Monsanto's Roundup, what it's doing is it's getting rid of the short-term issue, which is bugs in the crops and some weeds around the plants with this specific herbicide. But it goes much deeper than this, as I'm going to share with you today. And then, of course, I'm going to give you which foods to always purchase organic or just don't buy at all, and then which ones are safer that are purchased non-organic if you choose not to purchase all organic all the time. So a lot of people don't know as well, and when I was going through my research, is that glyphosate actually didn't start out, believe it or not, as a specific herbicide. It was filed, I think, about 20 years later or so by Monsanto, but it started out as essentially a metal chelator. As in 1964, Stauffer Chemical used it as a metal chelator to help clean and descale the boilers and pipes. And what it does is basically it pulls off a lot of the minerals. Some of those minerals would be manganese, zinc, cobalt, etc. Keep that in your mind for later in the show when we talk about how damaging that could be then to our body if we're losing high amounts of zinc. Okay, so about 10 years later, Monsanto filed it in a different use, and that as an herbicide. So they didn't actually create it. They used it, though, as an herbicide on plants, and essentially destroying almost like the nervous system, but the pathway inside of these weeds that I can't pronounce at all, that allows for those plants to grow. Now they said, okay, well, this is safe then, okay, for human use because this pathway does not exist in humans. Well, the problem is, again, super short-sighted because this particular product also acts as an antibiotic that we're going to talk about again later in the show. But just know that 70% of all the fresh produce in the United States has harmful pesticides on it. And these pesticides, I'll get to all the different damage they cause in the human body that have been clinically proven. I mean, these things are proven now, so much so that a company like Monsanto has already paid out close to $300 billion in damages. So almost, again, when we look at these stats, they're pretty unbelievable. When you look at raisins, which is now near the top of the list here, 99% had pesticide residue on them. That means 99% you're eating essentially bug spray. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Is like everyone doesn't want to think this way, but when you're putting in artificial food coloring into your body, you're eating paint. You really are. Your kids and yourself, you're eating paint. And I'm not saying this to come down on anybody, but awareness is truly the remedy. So you need to know that these things are the truth. You're eating paint when you drink these neon-colored drinks that are artificially colored. And when you're eating pesticide-laden food, you're eating bug spray, you're eating antibiotics, you're eating these herbicides, and that's what you're putting in your body. So besides raisins, when you look at strawberries, nectarines, apples, cherries, they're all 90+% of all of those fruit contain pesticides on them. So let's go into it now, because in just the past 15 years, glyphosate has increased by a 300% increase in spray on crops. Now, it's predominantly used, a lot of them are used with genetically modified crops, and these crops are modified to be able to use these higher dosages of these herbicide-based sprays. Well, today's show is not on genetically modified foods. I did a previous show on that. I'm going to try to have my team link that up at stevencabral.com/1629. And we'll link up the GMO podcast, and we're actually going to be linking up the labeling podcast of how to read your labels, since that's a separate show. So along with this increase in glyphosate spray, all over 70% of our fruits and veggies, at least 70%, by the way, that there's been a 500% average increase in the level of glyphosate, which is pesticide, found in human urine. And one study found that this urinary glyphosate levels in pregnant women was associated with a shorter pregnancy, a reduction in fertility, and a reduction in lifetime cognitive achievement of the children. So again, how does glyphosate affect us? Well, we know at least partially neurologically, partially in terms of fertility. We'll be talking about hormones in the endocrine system in a moment, as well as cognitive decline, or just not the same level of IQ. So another study that was used in humans was that those people that were chronically ill had significantly higher glyphosate residues in the urine than their healthy counterparts. Now, is that the only correlation? I'm sure it's not. I'm sure that overall, people that choose organic foods, they may be exercising more, they might be doing more for their health. There's always that part of it, but for sure, this is one component. Remember, there's never one thing that's the make it or break it. Typically not, right? There's multiple factors. So when we start to look at all the effects that it has, and I'll just name one more thing before we get into some of the common issues along with using an herbicide on human health and the environment, is that it used to be used, again, as a metal chelator, and then it was actually filed for an herbicide, and then also an antiparasitic, and now as a desiccant, which is basically like a drying agent or ripening agent. And so now it's being used even more because they found that, well, if you spray it on a crop towards the end of its life cycle, it will ripen faster, then you can produce it faster, you can get to market faster. Not good in terms of nutrition, but certainly in terms of profit if you're trying to maximize profits for these companies. So not a huge fan that companies are putting profits before people. Never a good thing for humanity. But again, we need to be aware of this. So one of the big downsides is the link to cancer. And that link is now, well, it's clearly proven, but also Monsanto paid out, and I talked about this on a previous show, I believe it was $289 million to, I don't know if it was just one person, but for sure it was made a big media-based story when a father of two was spraying this glyphosate spray without, proper hazmat suit. You need a hazmat suit to spray it, which is crazy because then we are allowed to eat it and put it in our body when we know that this spray stays on these foods for at least months, and those things that it absorbs in, it may never go away at all. So, and it's too bad because that man developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and now there's a pending case as of about a year and a half ago of 8,700 people with similar cases that are suing Monsanto. So the problem, though, beyond cancer, as if that wasn't bad enough, is that it does disturb the endocrine system. I talked about how it can cause infertility. I talked about how it can cause potentially miscarriages or shorten pregnancies, but also it's been shown to reduce testosterone as well. So not good for men, not good for women either. One of the issues that was interesting to look at it, that the actual problem may not even be the glyphosate itself, but actually as the glyphosate is being broken down in the gut, there's a metabolite from that breakdown called amino-methylphosphonic acid. Short for that is AMPA if you want to look it up, but it's amino-methylphosphonic acid. And this actually may be, which is a byproduct, again, of glyphosate. That's where it's coming from. It may be one of the reasons causing a lot of these factors as well. So if you just test glyphosate, okay, maybe it passes in some areas. But again, this is not, the USDA is not doing this testing. They get a free ride, essentially, to use this particular product. And also, the Roundup is not just one product. There's a lot of what they call inert ingredients, but there's anything but inert. They're working in synergies with this particular glyphosate herbicide. So again, it's affecting the endocrine system. It's affecting hormones. We see it in what it's doing in nature to things like frogs, etc. And it's a big problem. Before I get to the environment, I would like to talk about the gut for a moment. So when we look at this, and again, now we have studies to absolutely correlate it, but glyphosate is acting as an antibiotic, which makes total sense because it can be as an antibacterial. And so an antibiotic would be antibacterial, and that's essentially how it works. So it very well may be disrupting the gut microbiome. So now we're talking about killing off of good bacteria in the gut. And the problem with this is that if 70% to 80% of our immune system lies in and around the gut, the 28 feet of digestive tract, well, that's a major problem because that's what keeps us healthy. That's what allows us to absorb foods. That's what allows us to manufacture all those feel-good for the mind and body neurotransmitters such as serotonin. It's what allows us to manufacture things like vitamin B12. So extremely important to say the least. So we have it affecting cancer. We have it affecting hormones. We have it affecting pregnancy. Not a good thing. And lastly, it affects our environment. So if we care about our environment for future-based generations, and I hope that we do, when we see the dying off of bees, butterflies, ladybugs, all of these things that we need for our environment. They keep essentially the ecosystem in check. It's not just about pollinating flowers. It's not just about making honey. That's not what just bees do. We're talking about how they keep other insects in check, how flowers are allowed to flourish. I mean, we need all of these things. So again, we overlook it, and I'll probably do a much larger show on the environmental effect of a lot of these toxins in the environment, but I would like just to call this to your attention. And then, of course, there's the runoff into lakes and ocean from glyphosate-based sprays. And we know that it's killing a lot of the plant-based bacteria in food that these fish and crustacean live off of. So I'm not even talking about the genetically modified salmon right now. That's a whole different story. But because they're fed what? Well, they're fed corn and they're fed other soy and other byproducts that are heavily sprayed with glyphosate. So now those fish are actually eating glyphosate, not just it killing off their plant-based food. So it is a vicious cycle. And there honestly isn't a need for this because these sprays are put on corn and on soy and on products that are genetically modified. So we don't want to be eating those foods in the first place. This is not a race to save the planet with these genetically modified foods. It's anything from that. That is a nice media-based story, but that's simply not the case. Like, we can grow vegetables almost anywhere. Even in the north up here where I live, the winters are pretty brutal, right? But you can get a crop in a greenhouse for the majority of the year, right? You absolutely can. And you can grow, people are right on their own property can grow plenty of vegetables. I mean, again, unless you have no backyard at all, I get it, but you could even grow it on your roof. You can grow it on your deck. You can grow a fair amount of vegetation. And certainly, if you just look at the entire world, we can certainly grow enough vegetation to be able to satisfy and feed ourselves. We don't have necessarily a food shortage issue. We have a food distribution issue, and we just have a lack of care to feed the people that need the food the most. I mean, we can produce lots of food. And again, to be honest, mass producing corn, not even for it to be used as corn, but actually for it to be used as high fructose corn syrup and products. And soy, again, that's another one. I'm putting soy in everything. Well, we don't need soy in everything. I mean, if you want to make an argument for a couple times a week eating a little bit of non-GMO tofu, well, then that's okay. I mean, you can make that argument, but we're talking about putting soy in almost everything, which we certainly don't need as well either. So what do we do about this? Well, the nice thing is this. I mean, really, the nice thing is this, is we are able to vote every single time we go food shopping. We're able to vote with our dollars. Now, I do understand that when many people go grocery food shopping, there is a limited budget and they can only buy so much with those dollars. So don't think that I'm not aware of that and understanding of that fact. I do understand it, and I do want to give you then a list of foods that are still healthier, that have less of this herbicide-based spray, and that's called the Clean 15. So first, let's go over the Dirty Dozen, and again, I'm going to link all these up for you at stephencabral.com/1629. So let's go through the list. The Dirty Dozen. Now, what does this mean? Well, every year, the Environmental Working Group, I think they've done this since, I've been following this since 2014, so it's at least 2014 that they've been doing this. I wrote about this in the Rain Barrel Effect. I might have even put a list in there as well, and it's definitely part of the Rain Barrel Effect resources. But now we're on 2020, no longer 2018, right? So when we look at that top of the list, that means these foods absolutely do not eat these foods if they are not organic, okay? Because here's why. It's just not worth it. It's simply not worth it to eat these foods and eat this amount of glyphosate. Okay, strawberries always tops this list. It's at least always near the top. Strawberries, honestly, it's one of the worst foods that you can eat unless you know for sure it's organic. Even at that, not heavily sprayed organically. So one of the reasons for this is that you'll see many of these on the Dirty Dozen list. You can't wash it off, right? You just can't wash off the pesticide spray. It absorbs into the skin of that strawberry, and there's just no way to get it out. Okay, so even if you're using the wash that I gave you on a previous podcast, which was the apple cider vinegar in a tub of water, letting things soak, you couldn't even let your strawberries soak anyways. It wouldn't be good, nor would it be tasty for those strawberries. All right, number 2 is spinach. Number 3 is kale. Kale was at the top of the list, I believe, last year or the year before. Nectarines is number 4. Why? You've got that soft skin, right? It just allows it to absorb in. Apples. If you go to an apple orchard, it is unbelievable to look at those apples. They're almost white in color. They really are. They've been so heavily sprayed, they've got this, I don't know, I would say not quite a quarter of an inch, but maybe an eighth of an inch of dusting on them. That's just like tack. It's stuck to them, and you need to really wipe it off to be able to eat that apple. But apples, again, they are number 5 on this list of the Dirty Dozen. Grapes, another big one. So think about it. If you're drinking wine, is that wine organic? Because if not, just like apple juice or grape juice or wine, well, you're drinking herbicide. You're drinking bug spray. And again, think about what that's doing to your body in terms of toxicity. They do make organic wine. They do make organic biodynamic wines. They make organic biodynamic low sulfate wines. So these are things that you can find. Peaches, again, the soft skin. Cherries, same thing. We've got that soft skin coming in at number 8. Pears, a lot like apples. You get that heavy spray so that bugs, in this part, so that bugs are not eating them to a large degree. Tomatoes, again, the soft skin. Number 10, we've got celery, and we've got potatoes coming in on number 12. Potatoes are now moving on to the genetically modified list, by the way. Many potatoes are going that route, so we have to be careful of our genetically modified foods. So those are our Dirty Dozen. Keep in mind, raisins was mentioned as well, so I'd be careful, about that in your raisins. Now, I know that I have to mention this, but probably some of you are probably already saying, well, we get it because grapes is listed as number 6. Well, that just means good. You're a quick study. I didn't see that quick at first. I'm like, well, a raisin. Oh, yeah, that's a grape. Okay, so just keep that in mind, that raisins is on the list. We'll put it along with number 6. Okay, so what else can we look at? Well, now we need to give people what they can do, right? Because I don't like to be the bringer of gloom and doom. I like to say, buy organic when listening to the Dirty Dozen. Strawberries, spinach, kale, nectarines, apples, grapes, peaches, cherries, pears, tomatoes, celery, potatoes. Buy organic for those ones, okay? Or just abstain. Just stay away from them. Now, the next ones, we've got the Clean 15. Because one last thing I'll say about that is I don't believe the benefits of strawberries offset the pesticides in them. I just don't. I'm just not playing roulette with that type of potential exposure to the hormone system, cancer, etc. All right. So the Clean 15, choose to buy these organic, ideally, because you're voting with your dollars, or to make more organic food, or you can simply purchase these conventional, and conventional typically means sprayed. So number 1 is avocados. Number 2, sweet corn. Number 3, pineapples. Number 4, onions. Number 5, papaya. Little call out here. Pineapples and papaya are often genetically modified, so be careful of those. But if it says organic, then you know it's not genetically modified. Number 6, sweet peas. Number 7, eggplant. Number 8, asparagus. Number 9, cauliflower. Number 10, cantaloupe. Number 11, broccoli. Number 12, mushrooms. Number 13, cabbage. Number 14, honeydew melon. And number 15, kiwi. So I always like to say, you listen to the list above, many of them being fruit, right? So you say, well, I can't eat these fruit. Well, here's what you can do, though. You've got pineapple, you've got papaya, you've got cantaloupe, you've got honeydew melon, and kiwi. So those are other fruit that you can buy, conventional as needed. And the nice thing is these things are able to be peeled, right? You peel off the outside of the pineapple, papaya, and the honeydew melon, and you can actually eat the outside of the kiwi. That's actually a food that you can eat, that skin right on there. So when you look at these, and again, if you eat the outside of the skin of the kiwi, I would go organic. I don't think they're heavily sprayed, but at the same time, always a better idea if you're eating the outside of the crop or the plant itself. So again, always think about this. There's always something you can do. People get really upset when they're like, oh, this is horrible that they're doing this and using all these sprays and I can't afford organic. I get it. I totally understand it, but there always is something that you can do. And you can purchase the avocados, the sweet corn, as long as it's not GMO, the pineapples, the onions, the papaya, sweet peas, eggplant, asparagus, cauliflower, cantaloupe, broccoli, mushrooms, cabbage, honeydew melon, and kiwi. So you do still have lots of choices. And if you look at this list, you actually have 3 more that you can purchase than the other 3 that you can't. So I will link up everything today at stephencabral.com/1629. I hope today's show has been helpful. I do this every single year with a new updated list, thanks to the Environmental Working Group, a nice nonprofit group that I'm always happy to give a little shout out to. So thanks so much. Again, if this was helpful, please do feel free to share this information with anyone else you believe it could serve. Did you know that the body really only becomes sick or imbalanced in only 2 ways? Over time, you become deficient in vital nutrients, and you also accumulate toxins internally and from the environment. As those nutrients diminish and you increase your total toxic load, your body then begins to show the first signs of dis-ease. It's actually quite predictable, and the good news is that if we know how you began to fill up that proverbial rain barrel, we also know how to empty it to begin the healing process. I was fortunate enough to learn this ancient healing process from my mentor after suffering from debilitating diseases for close to a decade. It was only when I began to implement these techniques did I finally overcome my illnesses and go on to live a life of energy and vitality that I now enjoy. I'd like to share with you now what I discovered after traveling all over the world and how to combine the best of ancient healing wisdom with state-of-the-art science. Allow me to teach you exactly how I've been able to help over 250,000 people to empty their rain barrel and begin to transform their body and lives into what they've always hoped they could be. To get your copy of the international bestseller, The Rain Barrel Effect, simply go to stephencabral.com/rainbarrel.